Welcome to Laptop Radio. Today's topic is the emergent trend of media content and the reduction of fake news. We have Philip Sanders with us. He is an investment principal of New Media Ventures, and I'm really excited to have him. Hello, Philip. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. How you doing, Michelle?
I'm doing good. I'm glad that we have nice weather today.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, especially being out here in the Bay Area where the weather patterns are all over the place. I'm definitely lucky to be here and the weather's nice today.
Yeah, Philip's also in the Bay Area. We met at a mixer in
Yep,
one of the
definitely.
years when we could travel.
Yeah.
Philip, why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, sure. I am from Chicago, born and raised there, and I've been out in the Bay Area going on about 10 years. But before I came out to the Bay Area, I spent some time in Florida. I went to school there, a small private school called Bethune-Cookman University. And it was there where I first received exposure of communities outside of the South Side of Chicago in terms
Mhm,
of just diversity, not only in looks, but just the diversity in thought.
mhm,
So it was there where I was trying to figure out what would be that next step for me in
mhm,
terms of my life and what I want to do. And I decided to major in accounting because it was the business language of the world. I was able to secure an internship in the Bay Area.
mhm.
And when I first came to the Bay Area, I went to Berkeley and there were people walking around the street, some butt naked.
Yes.
But what I realized was they weren't being judged. Folks were just walking past and just
Mhm,
enjoying their days. And I said, you know what? This is the place for me. I need to figure out a way how to get out to the Bay Area. I did well at the internship and I was able to get a full time offer at a big four accounting firm.
mhm,
One was called Ernst and Young. So
mhm,
I spent my first few years out of college at Ernst and Young. I was an auditor, and especially being a black auditor, and you're going into certain clients. There are these different stereotypes folks have of you, like,
yeah.
oh, you're the auditor. Oh, you can do this. And not only dealing with certain job prejudices as well. But it was a great experience. It was my first introduction into VC as well as just the whole startup world. A few of my clients were VCs as well as former startups preparing for IPO.
Mhm.
That was where I kind of got my education in this different world of venture. And I said, my next opportunity, I want to get into this. So after Ernst& Young, I got into private equity at Rockwood Capital, spent about 3 years there. And then I made a transition to go over to KPOR. And it was at KPOR where everything kind of like came together
Mhm,
from the accounting, finance background to venture. And it was
mhm,
there where I worked close with the investment team at KPOR Capital.
mhm.
And I was able to kind of develop my chops being more front office, curious, and combining that with my back office experience. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
As an investment principal, what are some of the stuff that you do? What do you look at?
Yeah. A few of the things I do is for one, you have to develop kind of like a thick skin for saying no a lot,
Mhm,
but you also have to open your mind and getting educated with emerging trends and technologies, as well as dealing with a lot of smart, gritty people. And that's where the fun is too. Dealing with folks like that, not being set in your ways. A few of the things I do at my job is sourcing.
mhm,
You have oftentimes people reaching out to you and they want to pitch their company or their organization to you to try to gain interest. And again, they want capital and they want
mhm,
introductions. One of the things I like doing is if someone reaches out to me, I like at least acknowledging them,
mhm,
reaching back, just setting up some time to chat. The another thing I do is I do a lot of portfolio support as well. So we
mhm.
have over 100 companies. Dealing with those relationships can kind of be challenging a little bit, but I think it's also great because you get to learn a lot about the companies on a ground level. What
Mhm.
are their needs and wants, and how can you deploy resources? Portfolio support, sourcing, and also just the managing of the operations. How are things structured? How are we sourcing? How are things organized? What are some trends we see
Mhm.
in the different markets? At NMV, we invest in nonprofits as well as for profits. I'm getting that education all the time on new organizations and new companies that are centered around civic tech and engagement, advocacy work, media, and movement. Yep.
What is your goal in terms of new media ventures? What do you want to accomplish, say, in the next 3 years?
I would love to help build within NMV the the ecosystem of civic tech, advocacy, and just the importance of that, especially in media.
Mhm.
And if we can have more organizations invest in companies that are tackling those issues surrounding those areas, I think that that would be great. And if I can help that by putting more spotlight on the companies that we invest in to where the ecosystem in general can say, hey, this is something that we should pay a little more attention to. We too want to invest in companies like this.
Mhm.
Then having a part of doing that will be great within 3 years. I would love to see an explosion of opportunities for companies that are tackling these issues and where folks have an opportunity to invest in these companies. Other than building out the portfolio companies, strengthening the relationships we already have with our portfolio companies, those are some of the things that I'm looking forward to doing.
Awesome. And since the topic is the emerging trend of media content and the reduction of fake news, I want to talk about media content. What are some media content that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, I don't mean to plug a few portfolio companies, but I love technology that enables content creators ownership
Hmm.
and just creativity.
Hmm.
There are two platforms that we've invested in. One is called IndieGraph, and it's based out of Canada, but it's a publication platform
Hmm.
where their mission was to get into those spaces in cities where, because newsrooms are failing, they're closing up, it was given an opportunity for a person to build a digital newsroom and to monetize off of their content
Awesome.
by having subscribers. You can create your own newsletter, have a subset of subscribers that
Hmm.
love your content, and you're able to share that and also build a relationship with the subscribers. I love that because what it's doing is folks want to assess content to see, hey, is this real or is this fake news? And I think this is an opportunity where folks can have a voice to really write and create content for folks who really care about certain topics. I really love that. What else? Blavity has great content. They have this newsletter that they send out frequently. Juggernaut is another. I just love the emergence of digital publications.
Awesome. How do you think we can use technology and media to combat fake news, though? As companies are creating technology and allowing and empowering consumers to make news themselves and democratizing that, there's also a rise of fake news using AI and whatnot. It's hard to detect what is real and what is not anymore. And even if we can tell what is real and what is not, it also takes away our attention.
No, I hear you. And it's tough. And I think that's why there is this trend, I feel like, where people are trying to solve for that. And we see it all the time. Fake news, this is not real. There are folks out there trying to build technologies to combat that, to determine if this is real or fake. To answer your question, I've seen folks create content and then commenters
Mhm.
or people say, you know what, that's not real.
Mhm.
This is what's really happening.
Mhm.
You have platforms such as like TikTok, where when it first came out, I thought it was just something where folks dance and just
Mhm.
really show off their music and creative, flows. But it became like a political tool. during like
Mhm.
the election cycle last year, where folks were revealing, hey, this is what's going on in the protests, this is what's
Mhm.
going on in certain parts of the nation. And now you had folks that had TikTok as an app becoming reporters,
Yeah.
becoming content creators, and showing what was real from video form. They were getting in spaces where a lot of traditional news mediums weren't. And these folks had an audience. So they were sharing real time information to their followers. And that exploded. Now you had these tools where you can go anywhere around the world and really showcase what's real and what isn't. Being able to do that in a content publication form is huge. And I think with the tools that we have to this day, well, just currently and what's being built, content is being even more criticized and checked and double checked because
Mhm.
folks are looking like, hey, is this really real? Yeah, those are my thoughts.
Awesome. And when you're evaluating a startup, what are some of the values that you look for? And what are some of the criteria that you look at?
Sure. Other than the obvious, where we look at the actual technology, traction, how it feels, the experience, well, we also look at power building. Is this building power theory of change from the standpoint of we're creating something that will enable a person to want to do something and create movement and create power. Those are a few things. Another is I look at the founders and
Mhm.
I see how gritty they are. What's their story in terms of bootstrapping? What have they done with limited resources?
Mhm.
And I look at traction from another lens, not just the number of users you have or the amount of money you're getting from these users, but I look at traction from the lens of what other things have you done to this technology you've built to add and improve on it.
Mhm.
Um, I look at traction from that lens as well, as far as making the actual product a little bit better, tweaking the product. And I think that's important as well. We look at, of course, the type of customers,
Mhm.
engagement, just the typical. But what stands out to me, again, is grit, seeing how founders are able to overcome certain uncertainties, how they're able to manage their money with limited resources. I look at the power building aspect and I like hearing their story. And I like hearing it from the standpoint of a listener and seeing where they want to go with this company. Is it about the check? Is it about the fame? Because you get a lot of that too.
Yeah.
There are a lot of bad actors in the VC space as well as the startup space. I don't even want to go there. But in the startup space, you have some folks that would rather be on a panel with the technology that they're building, and that's just that. And as long as they're getting booked for certain panels or they're on a magazine cover, then that's good enough because it's the perception that I'm building something more so than the product itself,
Yeah.
or especially the audience that they're trying to serve. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, over the years, I think I've seen a lot of that. You see greed and you see fame, depending on what the intentions are. One of the hardest thing though is to discern among different people because I remember when I took startup class in law school, one of the things that I learned is you have to be able to judge people. And I really, really didn't understand that at that time, but now I do. And working with different startups as an advisor, when you misjudge people, you could really get hurt. You can get exploited. There's a lot of that. I guess my question and leading up to my question is how do you determine that? How do you judge different people, especially when someone approaches you with a pitch deck? And what do you look for in terms of people? And how do you tell? Because you meet someone, you meet them on Zoom. How do you determine if a team is good or not? And how do you really tell and discern their vibes?
The discernment piece is big, and that's still something that I'm still trying to perfect.
Mhm,
But from my experience, there are certain things that I like to double check on,
mhm,
especially if I have enough data and resources to lean on to kind of fact check. If there was a company, an emerging startup that said, "Hey, I have this traction, I'm doing this, our team is great and awesome," I'll do a reference check. I'll ask, well, what are some of your customers? Reach out to them and let me see what they say. Or especially that churn customer that decided not to participate even more. Let me hear what they have to say about the leadership, the onboarding, the experience. But if I have limited information and I'm just speaking via Zoom, see, when it was in person, you'll have folks that want to just bump into you. Oh, yeah, I have the startup. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. And it sounds great. And it's an interview and they're saying all the right things, but you can't really put them to the test in terms of is it really true what you
mhm.
say? Because you remember there was a time where all you needed was just a resume and a great interview and you got the job.
Yeah.
Nowadays, they're saying, okay, yeah, we want to do this test right quick, and it's going to be timed. And you're like, oh, okay, cool, let me do it then.
Okay.
So I feel like now the same thing is happening for startup founders that are coming to folks saying that they have this great technology, they're doing this, but how do you prove it with such limited space and
Yeah.
information that I have? So that discernment again is really important. And I think what helps is I'll ask certain questions around why did they create this,
Mhm,
their involvement in it, how did they find their co-founder,
mhm.
what do they see their company becoming in the next 5 years? And a lot of times you'd be surprised how many people lean to their pedigree in terms of that being a measurement of their intelligence. And that can kind of be a turn off as well. If I'm asking about your company and the technology and what you're building, and your answer always centers around your alma mater, how you came from this, and therefore I should be interested in you because of a school you went to, then I can get turned off a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually had experience with that. I was advising a company with a few founders that came from an Ivy League school, and that's all they talk about. It worked for law firms. So I learned that certain law firms would white glove you if you go to an Ivy League school, but they keep mentioning the name, dropping the school. And the person was really turned off. It was really interesting to me why someone would do that. But I completely agree with you. I think we're working on this project now, you're working on this startup. Why don't we focus on this?
Yeah, let's focus on that. But I get it. Sometimes folks may have certain insecurities. Maybe
Mhm,
they have insecurities around the stage of their startup. Therefore, to appease certain potential investors, they need to say, hey, my startup isn't at the place I wanted to be in, but you can still count on me because I went here. Sometimes folks may use that as assurance, like, hey, by the way, I went here, this and that. Sometimes it may work on folks, but to me, I love the gritty founders who may not come from those big schools,
mhm,
who've worked on a product, who also may be past a certain age of startup founder. I love talking to founders who are, and I'm just speaking to one today. This guy's in his probably mid 50s,
mhm,
but his experience is so vast to where he's seen and done it all. And
mhm,
now he wants to create a company and he's doing very well now. He's raising a Series A, and
mhm,
this is his first time doing this. Throughout his years, he's been in a consulting practice, and that can be another avenue to truly test your technology or the services you provide. Maybe going the consulting route to kind of stress test
mhm.
and determine product market fit could be a strategy before you add technology and really want to get into the venture space. And
Mhm.
that's what he's done. He's had this company going on 10 years, and then decided to spin off and create something as a subset, but want to add venture dollars to it. And now he has a lot of VCs interested in him because he has this knowledge base, he has this experience, and now he wants to get into the venture. He wants to get more venture dollars to truly scale. And I think
Mhm.
that's a really good approach. Hearing those different creative techniques or mechanisms founders have experienced is always a plus to me because it shows like, hey, if I can't get the money from here, I'm going to figure out a way in
Mhm.
maintaining to make it work. And especially during COVID, I think for me, it was revealed the grittiness of certain founders. I've seen founders pivot their whole business models because they care so much about their company, their business, their employees that, hey, if we have to pivot to a different business model, then let's do it. Those are the type of founders that you like to hear. And don't get me wrong, COVID has affected the world.
Mhm.
But when you can talk about, like, yes, in the midst of COVID, in the middle of it, we've done X, Y, and Z. Yes, we've had to let go of some folks, or I wasn't paid for 6 to 12 months, but I still wanted to keep going. Those are the type of stories that you like, that's really inspiring. And not a lot of folks can say that. And it's not to say that companies that weren't able to do that wasn't gritty either. But what I'm saying is the founders that were able to find a way in the midst of chaos and it not be like a Disney movie type story, like, oh, yeah, I did this and this has happened, where they're focused on a product and not their personal narrative. Those are the ones that I really listen to and I love engaging in.
Awesome. Let's talk about power a little bit more because I really love when you brought up the concept of investing based on creating power. What does that mean, creating power from
Yep.
your perspective?
Yeah, I look at it from the standpoint of when you're creating a product or an experience for a user, what do you want the end result to be?
Mhm.
Do you want them to just be a consumer and just take it? Or do you want them to be engaged
Mhm.
and mobilized?
Mhm.
And that's where the power building come into play here at NMV. Does it mobilize an individual to want to do something, to want to act?
Mhm.
And so there have been certain companies we've invested in that has created a platform to service emerging grassroots organizations that are truly power building. It's just in their nature.
Mhm.
That's what I mean from that standpoint in terms of being able to act on based on this technology or this organization. It just empowers you to want to do something. If it's, for instance, organizing certain voters, we have a company where they've created an app to register voters, to register unregistered voters. That again is building power for the folks that engage in this app to go out, to go in those places where the census couldn't reach those folks, get them registered. That is true power building because now you have more people registered. That means certain laws can be passed. And now you have more folks backing certain laws, or those folks have more of a voice
Mhm.
because of that mobilization. Those are examples of the power building aspect of it, to change laws, to change economies of scale.
All right, let's talk about crypto. You know that I would ask that question. How do you think crypto or cryptocurrency and blockchain could play a role in media content and the reduction of fake news?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. You know what? And maybe this is a question that I'm gonna put back on you too. What I get confused about is people using crypto for a financial instrument
Mhm.
for investment instead of what I thought would originally be a replacement of a financial instrument. Like, hey, we're engaging with Bitcoin instead of investing in Bitcoin and just sitting on it because the value is just exploding.
Yeah.
I've always felt like it wasn't built for that. I thought it was built from the standpoint of like truly engaging and community building and like,
Yeah.
hey, let's have something where we can record and it's something forever. So the way I'm seeing it now, folks are throwing certain cryptocurrencies around like, hey, have you invested in Bitcoin? I'm like, I missed the ball. Oh man, it's going up. And when I ask certain casual folks around about
Yeah.
it, it's used as like stock or like investing instead of what I feel was the original purpose was instead of using the dollars, I want to just use it for goods and services. But anyway, I say that all to say I love the technology from the standpoint of it having this ledger. You can't deny it.
Yeah.
It's forever. And I think that in terms of new media ventures and the type of companies we invest in, for instance, we're heavily involved in voter civic engagement, laws. Those are some of our sweet spots in terms of
Yeah.
investing in organizations and technologies that's centered around that. I foresee in the future blockchain being involved in the voting process. And when that happens, I think it's going to create all types of opportunities. I just leave that. I mean, what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I like a million thoughts on it, of course. And when you say voting, I co-founded a nonprofit called Governance Research Institute last year with a co-founder who's passionate about on-chain voting and governance. Many years ago, I was supporting a public company and helping manage the board of directors. For me, from a corporate governance perspective, I thought on-chain voting, submitting proposals and voting on an item is really cool. And also from someone who works in the blockchain space, I thought we need that because there's a lot of fraud. And I think on-chain governance would mitigate that kind of fraud. We had a conference last year in December. I'll send that to you. We spoke about voting. One of the project that won a hackathon basically created a voting app. And even on the radio show, I talk about quadratic voting. And I chatted with a few people about DAOs and how to use blockchain in voting and governance within companies, not just government. Of course, governments like in Africa, they're looking at e-governance. Electronic digital governance is becoming more and more important. And certainly we can use blockchain as a tool to collect different people and empower different people to help make decisions more efficiently. I'm looking forward to a new social media platform led by awesome founders because we don't want Animal Farm. I think a lot of people want something that is better than some of these centralized companies. Another thing I'm afraid of is people creating these companies who could be worse than what we have now. Using the ethos of decentralization is important that we look at the founders and look at their values before we support some of these newer companies as well. Those are some of my thoughts for now. And
Yeah.
yeah, but I think there are good companies out there. And I think blockchain plays an important critical role in media, especially when NFTs is going mainstream. Satellite Knife just did a episode on what the heck is NFT. It's exciting.
Yeah, I need to see that episode too. And I'm sure it's very engaging too. I need to look at that one.
Yeah,
But
I'll send all the materials to you so you can check
yeah,
out.
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I mean, what happens? How do you even discern when you have folks that say all the right things, values alignment and everything, and it still goes left? Have you had
Yeah.
those type of experiences?
Yeah, as an advisor to a number of companies, I would say that 50% of the founders I help are pretty bad and the 50% are good. It's really hard. And with that, I actually also filter them. Some of them I actually know a couple years back. You kind of know through time. They leave red flags here and there. There are good
Yeah.
projects and there's founders with that grid and other founders are just using the movement to raise money. If you give a project a certain months, you'll see here and there different red flags from founders. They can't really hide it all the time. If they don't keep the word, then you could kind of tell they're not consistent. They say one thing, they do the other. And a lot of times, once they raise money and they drop you, that's a big red flag because they're just
Mm.
using you to raise money from the investment community. You have some kind of blacklist for certain companies? What do you do when stuff
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
happens?
You're talking about a blacklist if their intentions aren't the best or
Yeah,
they're not being honest. There was a situation that happened at a company I knew of where the co-founders were fraudulently allocating money
yeah,
that they raised in their pockets.
yeah. I
And
heard of that.
what happens when you have a lot of investors that invested in that company? You're the lead investor. And now you have this intel and this information about these two co-founders that you just found out.
Yeah,
And the company is valued at this. You put money in as a lead investor. You were the ones that championed all the other investors to come into this round. And now you've just received this information. How do you tell those founders,
yeah,
those other investors, what happened? How did you drop the ball? Do you blame it on the co-founders? Were there telltale signs? Were there red flags? In this particular situation, what they did was they ousted the co-founders, both of them, and they brought in new co-founders, and they were able to kind of like pivot the model a little bit,
yeah,
still keep the name and basically maintain it. But again, you have to tell the other investors, hey, this is what happened.
yeah,
And when that happens, now the investors have this information about what those founders did. And it's up to them to share with other folks in the community. And when that happens, when your name is on that blacklist per se, it's a lot harder to raise.
yeah,
It's a lot harder to raise. But I've seen folks do things we've all have where co-founders made a ton of money. They've done things really wrong to their employees. They get ousted. Then they start another company, raise some more money. And I think what it comes down to is as long as you have a good idea and it's making money, folks will still invest in you no matter what integrity is missing.
yeah,
And that's the truth. And
yeah,
we've seen that with folks. Does it really matter if this person is wrong, has been accused of sexual allegations, have been accused of racism or stereotypes? They're starting another company and is making money. Hey, that's all I care about. So when you have that sentiment, it just depends on the investor. But to answer your question, I believe that there is a list
yeah,
because it's another list of investors that only invest in each other's things, that
yeah,
share deal flow.
yeah,
That's a whole different type of list. I'm sure if that list exists, then there's a list of the blacklisted companies as well.
yeah.
Uh, I just haven't seen it, but I know that it exists.
I think it exists. I mean, there has to be. I just hope there is. Is there anything that you wanted to share that I have not asked you?
No, other than if folks have questions or they want to reach out to me, I'm always open for virtual coffee. And I'm sure you'll probably put my information. But no, I would love to learn more about those NFTs. And I think going forward, as you continue to work with these founders, I guess a question I will leave you in closing would be what is that thing that keep you motivated when you have such a high probability of founders not being honest? You said 50%?
Yeah, in the blockchain space. Yeah.
Yet, how do you maintain your excitement of doing this day in and day out, knowing that maybe one out of two folks may not be the most honest?
For me, I think in about end of 2019, I also speak at different conferences and I get men because I'm a woman telling me that because like well, I put you in a conference to speak, that gives you credibility. What could you do for me? And it
Mm,
just kind of broke my heart because I
mm,
travel a lot to speak all over the world in the blockchain space because I really love the ethos of decentralization. And as a woman, I'm like, I don't really need credibility. I've worked, it was a privacy conference. I had hands on knowledge working on the issues and challenges of privacy. Yeah. For me, it was just like, what are some of the lessons that I need to learn during that
yeah.
time? for that 50%. Do I need to filter people better? How could I tell? And what do I need to do? Do I need to assert my rights so that it won't happen again? Because, of course, for me, I wanted to be a better human and I wanted to
Right.
empower the community. I really love the community and I go to Clubhouse a lot and it had really changed communities by focusing on creativity in 2020. It's healing. So far, everyone that I've met on Clubhouse in the NFT space has been amazing. And everyone that I
Mm,
work with has been good. I basically advise less companies and focus on the other 50% that are good and just empowering those. And then also helping build the NFT community. I think there was one project that I left pretty early because I see some kind of challenges in there. So I'm getting
yeah,
better now and just really focusing on the good founders. I don't like to empower founders who are utilizing or exploiting people or the technology to enrich themselves.
that
That's
is
just one of my
awesome.
values.
Yeah. Have you done a show on top 5 signs that fraud is being committed in this space?
Sure. I have not done it yet. I talk about that a lot. One of my friends and I had an idea about creating a technology that allows for some kind of detection. However, we don't want anything that causes defamation. We want to focus on the company and trying to detect fraud in the space. Yeah, we should
Got
talk
it.
more about that. And maybe we can kind of come up with a show and
Yeah, totally, totally. That'd be great. Even if you did do this technology, maybe relabeling it instead of fraud, just errors. Like, hey, we've noticed a number of errors. We don't know if you knew about those errors, but this is an error detection. So,
yeah, exactly. And then there's a company called Greenlight that I met from the aviation security. I would love to actually interview some of them, some of the folks from
yeah,
there one of these days, because I think it would help a lot. And I actually was in their class doing the talk, and it's awesome. It talks about leadership as well. So it's kind of helpful, especially how to discern good founders versus
mm,
bad founders. And I think we talk about duality. I think
yeah,
minor, because nobody's perfect and founders are not perfect, but I'm talking about major
mm-hmm,
activities that are not acceptable.
mm-hmm. No, that's
Not
real. I think,
acceptable.
yeah, yeah, no, I hear you. I think that's something that folks should hear. And I appreciate this. I appreciate this show here and even just having a conversation with you. I look forward to having more with you. I've only been at NMV going on about 2 months now with myself and the VP of investments, Jessica. We're trying to create strategy, infrastructure to support the next cohort of founders. We do this event every year called the Summit, where we spotlight 14 different for profit and nonprofit companies and give them an opportunity to present their companies to a select invite list of investors and just to get them funded. And I think it's a great opportunity. We've had 1,400 submissions this past year. We've had to narrow it down to 14. It's like 1%. So just being able to do that was really good. And again, having to say a lot of no's isn't the best, but
Yeah.
I think that what you're doing here is needed. And I look forward to having more conversations with you.
Thank you, Philip.
Cool, cool. Well, you take care and talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Oh, okay. Bye.